It's time for a little bit of Niners talk as we're joined by our friend of the show, Chris Biderman of the Candlestick Chronicles. Chris, how are you doing? I know you follow some of the King stuff too, so we're going to give everybody a break as we talk some Niners here.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're good. Getting into the Niners, and I know everybody got a look at Chase Young, and there were jokes about him not having number 99 as he's in his number 92 this season. Do you think there's even more pressure on the Niners this season with the addition of Chase Young? I already thought it was Super Bowl or bust, but you add this guy. I mean, do you think that the team is starting to feel it as well?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I don't know if they're feeling external pressure, but they came into the season putting a lot of pressure on themselves because they realized, and I think I've told you guys this a few different times, that they realized coming into the year that this group, given the expenses, they might not be around for a whole lot longer when it comes to like some of the core guys being together, right? You can go through the cap situation for this team over the next 2 or 3 years, and I would say even next year there's a possibility that they're looking at maybe shedding a couple guys or two who have some of these high-priced contracts. So this is a group that has the understanding that, this is probably the most talented team that Kyle Shanahan's had since he's been coach as 2017. And then, you add Christian McCaffrey last year, it sort of felt like a Deion Sanders type addition to the offense, right? Thinking back to 1994. And then now you add Chase Young to what's arguably one of the most talented defensive lines, albeit the production hasn't been there recently. But I would say it is Super Bowl or bust for this team because there doesn't really feel like there's that one elite juggernaut team out there that is simply unbeatable, right? And I think when you look at the league, the Niners, when they play their best ball, they can make an argument that they're as talented or as good as anybody in the league and can beat anybody in the league. So yeah, I would say their expectation has to be Super Bowl or bust, particularly given how well they played in the first 5 weeks of the season.
Chris, just in general, what do you feel like the Niners need to be better at the second half of this season?
I think it's the back end of the defense. I think it just doesn't seem as tightened up as we're used to seeing from the secondary, the linebackers, the safeties. It just seems like, and they've talked about this pretty openly, that they've just felt a little disjointed when it comes to tying the coverage to the pass rush together, right? Like they typically do a really good job of taking away a quarterback's first read and then forcing the quarterback to double pump or go through his progressions. And then you marry that idea with just an elite pass rush, and the 49ers are really hard to score on. Well, lately, and it goes all the way back to week 2 against the Rams, it's just, Matt Stafford getting to the top of his drop, getting the ball out. Joe Burrow hitting the top of his drop, getting the ball out. Kirk Cousins getting the ball out. And they're going to face a similar challenge this week in Jacksonville because Trevor Lawrence has been one of the best QBs in the league at getting the ball out quickly. And that's behind an offensive line in Jacksonville that's frankly not very good, right? So the 49ers on paper should have a huge advantage when it comes to the trenches on defense, but frankly, teams have been taking advantage of the 49ers secondary. And I don't know if it's a schematic thing or if it's just a communication thing or what's happening, but you have a first-year coordinator in Steve Wilkes, and obviously there have been some growing pains, and he's made some questionable decisions in terms of play calls. But it just seems like they haven't married the coverage to the pass rush in a way that we've been so accustomed to seeing under DeMeco Ryans and Robert Saleh before him.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Candlestick Chronicles, and there are a lot of sound bites that came out from yesterday with Chase Young speaking to the media as a Niner for the first time. And, both him and Nick Bosa went to the Ohio State, and they're joking about it's going to be a race to the quarterback. Do you think it's just going to be that simple? I mean, we thought that at the beginning of the season, the defensive line was not going to be an issue. You add Chase Young, who's another top DN getting to the quarterback. Is it going to be that simple that you add Chase Young and it's just going to be these memes that we see of quarterbacks being scared for their life? Is it that simple, or does Steve Wilkes still have some fixing to do with whatever has been wrong on that defensive line?
I think it is that simple. And here's the thing, right? You can even go back to the earliest days of Kyle Shanahan running the Niners offense in 2017, 2018, 2019. One of his skills as an offensive designer and play caller has been the fact that he's able to get the ball out of his quarterback's hands pretty quickly, right? Like all those games against Aaron Donald in the regular season, at least, the 49ers have mostly negated Aaron Donald or played him as well as anybody because they're not doing, 7-step drops and they're staying ahead of the chains on third down and not having to do these long passing plays on third down because Kyle Shanahan's really good at getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands through schematics, right? Well, which offensive system has made its way throughout the league through various coaches and different arms of Shanahan's coaching tree, right? It's the same offense.
Mm-hmm.
So now throughout the league, you have offenses that are better equipped to get the ball out of their quarterback's hands quickly because that's what's been successful. And it's really been started by Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and everybody else who's come out of that coaching tree. Mike McDaniel, obviously, also. So you have a league now. It's obviously a copycat league, and you have a league that's running a lot of Kyle Shanahan's offenses, and you go back and think about what Shanahan's offenses have been good at, and it's not really a surprise that you find that more offenses throughout the league are good at negating pass rush. So it does come down to the 49ers just being better in coverage, and whether that's communicating better, whether that's dialing up better coverages and playing more to their strengths with more zone defense and less predictable man-to-man looks when they do blitz. I think that's something that has to be considered too. So no, I don't think it's going to be as simple as just adding Chase Young and saying, okay, go get the quarterback, because as we've seen during this 3-game losing streak, quarterbacks haven't had a problem getting to the top of their drop 2-3 steps and getting the ball out in 2 seconds before the pass rush can even get there. So they have to force the quarterback to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, and that starts with coverage. And once they do that, then I think we start seeing a defense that resembles what we're used to seeing from this 49ers unit.
Chris, I saw Akash Anavarathan tweet out that the Niners haven't played, since week 5, every defense the Niners have played has been top 11 in DVOA. Do you think that that's a justifiable reason why this Niners offense has kind of struggled as of late? And do you think that that's a good enough excuse or a reason why?
No, I don't. I think that the biggest issue for them is, they're typically really, when the 49ers offense is playing well, it's one of the best offenses in the NFL on first and second down, right? And that a lot of that stems from being able to run the ball effectively. And they just haven't been able to run the ball effectively. And I think that's one criticism you could probably make of Kyle Shanahan's offense since he's been with the 49ers is that, they don't really have a secondary move to go to when the run game isn't setting everything up, right? Like when the 49ers offense is in rhythm, they can do a run play and throw the same look at you and then go play action, bootleg the other direction and have George Kittle, 20 yards open downfield, right? Like this is not something where, we haven't seen Kyle Shanahan really orchestrate a really good offense when they haven't been able to run the ball. And obviously a lot of that stems from not having Trent Williams, right? Arguably one of the best, if not the best, run blocking offensive lineman in the NFL. And so, you can look at the rushing numbers. They're averaging like 3.5 yards a carry over the last 3 weeks during their losing streak, where they were well over, I think, 5.5 during the first 5 weeks of the season, right? Like that's really substantial. And when they're able to run the ball, it sets up everything they do in the passing game. But when the 49ers are facing 5 down fronts and they don't have Trent Williams, they're just really struggling to run the ball at nearly the same level. And it's impacting everything else they do. So yeah, they have played good defenses, but they should be better than this. They have too many weapons. They've obviously been missing Deebo Samuel as well. So if they can get Trent Williams back, Deebo Samuel back, and start to run the ball like they did during the first 5 weeks of the season, I think that's going to be a far better recipe for them. But I'm still curious if they get to a situation where, in the playoffs, say, and they can't run the ball against a playoff team, then, are they going to be able to win with just the pass? And so far we haven't seen them do that.
Chris Biderman, Candlestick Chronicles. Chris, before we get you out of here real quick, a lot of conversation every week. Brock Purdy is getting compared to a different quarterback. Is Josh Allen one week? Is Trevor Lawrence the next week? What do you think about the comparisons with Brock and some of these up-and-coming / elite QBs? And who are you taking? I'm putting you on the spot. Trevor Lawrence or Brock Purdy?
It's hard not to take Trevor Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
But, I do think, I think you can objectively say Brock Purdy's been one of the best 12 quarterbacks in the league this year. And, we're like a month removed from calling Brock Purdy an MVP candidate after that game against the Giants. And truthfully, I think he was playing to that level. But, obviously when you start to throw some interceptions and, it comes back to earth. It can come back to earth really quickly. And, I've said this to you guys before too, they were never going to go undefeated and win every game with Brock Purdy as a starter. It was just going to be, over a prolonged period of time, can he be a winning quarterback and get you where you need to go? And so far, I would say under the right circumstances, he absolutely proves that he can get you to where you need to go and you can play at a high enough level. But when the circumstances aren't great, when you're missing your left tackle, when you're missing one of your star receivers, then can your quarterback be the rising tide that lifts all boats? And we've seen flashes of it. The 49ers can certainly move the ball when Brock Purdy's back there, and they did it against Cincinnati. But can you limit the mistakes, right? And that's not what Purdy's been able to do during this 3-game losing streak is limit the mistakes. And maybe even, I don't know how much we include the Cleveland game in that discussion. But certainly the last 2 games against Minnesota and Cincinnati, it hasn't been a problem when it comes to just moving the ball. It's, not turning it over in the red zone. And those are just backbreaking mistakes that Brock Purdy didn't make during his first year as starter last year and during the first 5 games this year. So, when it comes to quarterbacks and how we view them in terms of them being elite or not, I think you have to look at it like, over multiple years with different rosters, can your team still be a contender as the circumstances around the quarterbacks change? And I think with Brock Purdy, we've seen him excel when circumstances are ideal, and we haven't seen him necessarily excel when those circumstances differ. And that, to me, is what separates the truly elite quarterbacks from the quote-unquote system game manager guys. So I think that's sort of the next step we need to see from Brock Purdy, to where we start elevating the conversation from, is he a top 10, top 12 guy, to like, is this guy like a top 6 quarterback and MVP candidate? And he certainly looked like that during the first 5 weeks of the season, but he's obviously taken a step back in the 3-game losing streak.
Well said, Chris Biderman. Listen to him on the Candlestick Chronicles. Chris, thank you as always. We will see what the Niners do against the Jags this weekend, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you again, my friend.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.